Well, good afternoon and welcome back to the 13th Annual Santa Barbara Botanic Garden Conservation Symposium. Thank you for staying around. I'm the other H. Schneider of the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. My name's Helene Schneider, and I have the distinct honor of serving as chair of the Board of Directors, the Board of Trustees for the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. I'm so excited to be able to moderate this incredible panel today. So thank you first to all the attendees here in person, and hello to those online today and into the future. I also want to thank our speakers, Heather, Zach, and Alejandro, and again, thank our sponsors, the Nakashima Rennie family, Blackbird Architects, Christian and Melissa Stepien, Cox Communications, and Newshawk. Can we give them a round of applause, please, for making this happen? So we have about a half hour or so now to literally bring it on home, right? What are we going to do at home, or what I like to say, to be the change you want to see? With so much going on in our chaotic world, no matter whichever way you want to look at it, there are always things that we can do to make our world, our community, our city, our country better. And this is one way. And we're going to literally just kind of take it on home here. We have an amazing panel. We're bringing in some distinct voices here. You've heard from two of them already. Our honoree, and congratulations to Doug Tallamy, to Alejandro Lemus, who you just heard before the break. And I want to introduce also, we have Hugh Ranson, who was mentioned up on the big screen earlier this morning, a Santa Barbara local homeowner who's helping the movement grow by welcoming native plants into his landscape. And Dean Noble, who is the executive director of Elings Park. We heard a little bit about Elings Park today, didn't we? But that partnership would not have happened without your leadership. So thank you so much. So like I said, I want to, bring it on home. I took maybe quickly go around one tiny little thing that one could do today, tomorrow, this week. To me, I'll bring up one, was change my motion light to a yellow bug light. Something as simple as that, right? So that when it goes on at night, then the moths don't freak out, which I never knew that was even a thing. I'm going to start with you. Because you're a homeowner, you were mentioned, you have a beautiful, amazing space now. It wasn't always that way. What's your story? How'd you get here? Why are you sitting in that chair right now?
Is this on?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. It's a long story. I started with birds when since I've been a birder since I was 12, and during COVID, I decided I was teaching from home and had a little bit of spare time. So I decided to learn the butterflies and the dragonflies, and just became a lot more aware of insects. And then I found out about the insect apocalypse. So I live in a small condo complex. It's only 6 units. And we have a big, on Robin Street, Santa Barbara, only about a mile or so away. A couple of miles. We had a big area out front, about 50 feet square, where we had, if you ever drive down Robin Street, you probably have driven past this huge oak tree that we had growing there. It was about over 100 years old. And it became diseased. We had to take it down, and there was arguments about what we're going to do with this piece of land, and nobody could decide anything. So a couple of years go by, it's just full of weeds. And I put forward the proposal that why don't we just grow natives there? That got turned down. I tried it again, and I said, I will do all the work. We won't have to pay anything for watering after we get things established, and I'll take it on. And so finally, I got the votes out of 6. Yeah. Mine was the deciding vote. And so I visited with Scott Pipkin at the Botanic Gardens, and he was great, really helped me, choose some different plants. And this was about 2.5 years ago now. Put maybe over the years, I put about 30 different native plants in the ground. And it's just taken off. It's going nuts. I'm a big believer in iNaturalist. I just love iNaturalist, and I've been cataloging all the native bugs that have been coming to the yard. And I'm up to about 65 different bees, wasps, beetles, spiders, and I haven't even included the birds in that. So I've been learning a ton, and it's just been so rewarding.
Great. Thank you. You had a phrase that I appreciate, and I'm going to ask all the speakers here. Over the years, things happened, right? So it doesn't just happen. It's a cumulative effect. And I think, Doug, you mentioned that in your transformation of your 10 acres. Maybe start with Dean. We haven't heard from you yet at all today. But what, in terms of thinking the first steps, and maybe whether it's Elings Park or just thinking in general, whether it's a big landscape, a small space, the resources, what are kind of like the initial thoughts, kind of key strategies we should think about if we want to literally bring it on home?
Sure. I'm Dean Noble, Executive Director at Elings Park. One of the first things I did after I got the job was invite Steve Winhager to come hike the park. That's a good first step. There was black mustard over my head. Elings Park, Doug, is a 200, can I call you Doug? Okay. It's a private nonprofit park. We don't get any government funding, and half of it is on the site of an old landfill. And the site where the transformation acre is used to be dry farmed for legumes. It had been stripped, destroyed. At one point, it was going to be housing development. At another point, it was going to be a Jesuit seminary. It was going to be an event center for a while. Did you guys know that? I've got the press clippings to back it up. Just degraded. So black mustard over my head, and all I could hear as I hiked through it for the first time was, "This is John Pullman Terry at the site of the Elings Park fire." So we brought in Kuyama lamb, we brought in sheep, and it was, 6 years ago, it was novel. So my elementary startup steps would be invite Steve Winhager for a hike, bring in sheep. Get rid of the non-natives. They tremble when they hear your boots coming.
So Hugh, we heard your story. Did you start just one little piece, right? But what was your, was there a favorite plant that you wanted? Was there a particular, you needed community support or consensus, right? In terms of where you got started. What was like one of the first things you did to get started?
I ordered some free mulch from the city, and a couple of neighbors helped me get those 2 truckloads of mulch out over the ground to try and smother the weeds. Plants, really just tried a variety right off the bat, but favorites have definitely been the buckwheat. They really attract the native plant bugs, and the not Kenyan sunflower. What's it called? The Encelia.
California sunflower.
California sunflower, and that reseeds, and it just is going crazy, and it attracts so many pollinators. It's amazing.
Great. And then for Alejandro, in terms of resources and planning, maybe first steps to think about.
I think, can everyone hear me? Yes. I think it really starts with forming a connection with a plant. You heard me talk a lot about hummingbird sage. I like to consider hummingbird sage to be my gateway native plant. So I looked at that plant and never looked at the world again the same way. So I encourage you to start to look at and explore plants that you have a connection with, because I think when you form that connection with the plant, everything else makes sense. But in terms of resources about how to get started, I think the Botanic Garden is a wonderful place to visit and just get an idea of what native plants can look like in different settings. We've heard about coyote brush and how it can potentially be unsightly or rangy. I personally love coyote brush, but the beauty of native plant gardening is you can have a manicured aesthetic garden that is still a functional ecological garden. And on the other end of that spectrum, you can have something that is naturalistic, wild habitat. So I think it just really starts with going out, looking at gardens, and getting inspiration.
Great. And Doug, any other thoughts on initial steps?
The initial step starts in your head to decide this is something you want to do. And most people in the country don't garden at all. They hire a lawn service or an arborist. They're busy doing everything else. So I want to address those people too. we've got to increase the number of ecological landscapers, ecological gardeners, so that you can just go out and hire somebody. You don't have to think about it. They will know the right plants. They'll know how to manage it. But making the decision to say, I want to do this in an ecologically friendly way, that's the big step. I do get asked, what is one thing, the most important thing that we all can do? And the answer to that is vote. So after you voted, 80% of us live in cities. They don't have big yards. So what can they do? That's the container gardening that we mentioned a little bit this morning. I will mention on our website, homegrownnationalpark.org, there is a section on container gardening, the best native plants for your eco-region. So you don't have to guess what's going to work in a container, and that makes that part easier. But that involves everybody then. The apartment complex that's just a pile of bricks becomes a resource for pollinators if everybody puts plants on their balcony. So you don't have to own land, and you don't have to be a gardener yourself to make this happen.
Great. And some of you may know I was connected to the city of Santa Barbara for a little while. And while I was there, we had a thing called a drought, like a major, major drought. You would never know over the last month that California was in drought conditions. But to get to Alejandro's point of loving the browns and the greens, and we, part of our mantra was gold is the new green, so trying to transform lawns into native habitat. The conversation then was more about drought resistance, and we're trying now to move it towards native plants and water resiliency. I believe the city of Santa Barbara still has, through their sustainability and resiliency division, you can get funding to replace your lawns and put in native plants. You talked about voting. What other kinds of community relationship advocacy things that, maybe we should consider? If you can't have sheep in your yard, but you may ask other agencies or communities to get involved. You got involved in your neighborhood, teaching and certification for gardeners in the area. What other kinds of literal grassroots advocacy can we do?
I wanted to ask Hugh, if you think when you had asked for permission to make this garden, if you had said, I want to make a garden, instead of I want to make a native garden, would you have gotten permission faster?
If I'd said,
I just want to make a garden, I'll do it, instead of I want to make a native garden. Because there's this,
I think it would have been faster.
Oh,
yeah.
native
Then you sneak in the natives,
Yeah,
if that would happen?
I think it would. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't say that, but that's what it's going to be. You just sort of do it.
No, just call it a garden. I'm going to make a beautiful garden and leave the word native out, and then all the misconceptions can go by the wayside.
Other.
You can come the third Saturday of every month. Where's Sarah? We're going to be doing our meetups second Saturday of every month, and we did plein air landscapers at Elings Park at the Transformation Garden last month. This month is going to be a meditation walk. And the last one in December is going to be something I've never heard of before. It's mountain biking and native plants. And we might have pioneered that here first. So come to Elings Park second Saturday of every month. We've been doing it for 3 years, and we get 25 to 30 people for each session. 10 o'clock.
Good.
In the morning.
Hugh and then Alejandro?
Yeah. We have a little strip, on the by the side of the road there, and it had some Indian hawthorn, an old some non-native plant, and they died. So I took those out and I put in lemonade berries there, and also tons of poppies have been growing in there too. It's just a small strip, but just having things, doing something like that just along the roadway. It's fabulous.
Parkway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Alejandro, any other?
I think taking classes at the Botanic Garden is a great resource just to learn about native gardening and horticulture and how you could potentially start to utilize that in your front yards or container gardens or raised beds. I think also supporting your landscaper to participate in one of the garden's landscaper certification programs is an awesome way, especially if they're lacking native plant knowledge, perhaps. But what I like to say is that landscapers, they're not lacking knowledge. I think a lot of that knowledge is dormant, and it's just waiting for the right cultivation for those principles to come to life again. So definitely recommend folks check out the Botanic Garden and what we have to offer as, a horticulture, conservation, and educational resource.
And can you talk also about maintenance part and some of the don't do's, like Roundup? No, right? I mean, that seems like a kind of obvious thing, but I think if you were saying not everyone gardens, sometimes have people come in and do maintaining the yards. You have control over what can and can't be done. Are there some current go-tos or pit holes or, other kinds of things that you, as part of the certification process, you train the gardeners, like, use this product versus that product? And maybe what are some of those?
That's a great question. I think at the core of our certification, part of the curriculum is really teaching people to understand that a habitat garden is a place where all life thrives. Wildlife, humans, we coexist and thrive together. So part of that is minimizing the use of pesticides, minimizing the use of amendments or fertilizers. So we really try to encourage people to start to think about the garden as something that's living, and our actions can have a huge implication there. So again, I come back to this idea of, again, letting the browns, the muted colors of the landscape exist, because that's very much supporting wildlife. So getting people to understand the habitat value of fruits, of spent seeds, dry inflorescences or flower stalks, that's definitely one thing that I want people to start to admire. That, California, there are seasons. It's the rainy season and the dry season. And we have spring where it's beautiful, but the summertime is just as important for supporting wildlife with flowers that bloom year round or fruits that feed wildlife. So really getting people to understand that a habitat garden is full of life.
Go ahead.
I just want to add, if you do hire someone, I hear across the country, my gardener, my landscaper won't do that. I said, well, you're the boss. Fire them and hire somebody who will do that. So you're in control. That's the one thing I want to say.
Great. Can we talk a little bit more about the smaller spaces? I mean, City of Santa Barbara, anyway, more than half of its residents are tenants, so they don't own the property. They rent. They might have a tiny, tiny space. We saw the little balcony, plants. What other kind of either keystone species or what can be done in small spaces?
One idea I've had, I don't know that anybody's actually done it, is if you're in an apartment complex, you don't own any of the land. But let's say there's a tree out front. The landlord often says, I don't want to fool with any kind of different gardening. So you say, I will adopt that tree. It'll be my responsibility. I'll put a bed under it. I'll make soft landings. I'll make sure that it's cared for. You don't own it, but you are making a difference in that landscape. And if everybody in that apartment complex adopted a plant outside, it could be a really healthy landscape. Don't know that it's ever been done, but something to think about.
Anything else? Any other thoughts? Small spaces?
Don't forget, you can get plants at
Santa Garden.
Santa Barbara Botanic Gardens, and they have extensive knowledge there too.
Great. So question was, any small plants you recommend for container gardens?
That's a great question. I encourage you to get creative with wildflowers. There's so many wildflowers that do well in balconies that provide habitat for beneficial insects. There's so many great native plants that are adapted for living in containers. One of the plants that I highlighted in my presentation was our native succulent, the Live Forever or Dudleas, which are unfortunately being actively poached in the wild. There are regulations and laws being put in place to protect them, but that is a plant that is completely decimated in the wild sometimes, and is such a great hummingbird plant. So, if you're thinking about cultivating native plants on a balcony, wildflowers are a great option. We have so many incredible native succulents like Dudlea, or if you're into it, you can cultivate choyas. I stay away from them, jumping cacti, but there's many ways to get creative with native plants in containers.
Great. I want to ask all of you, there's a lot going on in our world, in our country, our city. That seems overwhelming, and native plants just seem so nice. It seems like it's a nice thing to do, but it's more to it than that, right? It's connected to climate change. It's connected to heat islands. But in all the different types of activities that we're concerned about, and how do we incorporate entering native plants into our everyday lives, into everything else that's going on in the world? Is there a way to make that connection, or that you've been able to talk, or volunteers tell you about, or sense of well-being? I just wanted to bring up the bigger context, and I think, Alejandro, you did a really nice job in your presentation on that a little bit. Go ahead. Do you want to start, or Doug?
The reason we're talking about native plants is because of the biodiversity crisis. when we have an election, you look at the top 10 things people are worried about, and the biodiversity crisis is not on there. So my goal has been to get it on there, raise its priority in our culture, that this is really serious business. We all have to be involved. Still not on that list, but maybe the next election coming on, we'll get there. But that has been. You can't talk about the biodiversity crisis without talking about native plants. So we start with the reason we're concerned, and then we move on to the native plants.
Do you guys know who Oliver Sacks is? They made a movie about his life, Awakenings, with Robin Williams, once upon a time. They published an essay in the New York Times posthumously, and he said there are two things that he found as efficacious for his patients with extreme neurobiological difficulties. He said they were as efficacious as pharmaceuticals. One was music, and what do you think the other one was? Gardening.
The thing about weeding, it's like it's done the moment you do it. It's awesome.
He said he'd bring his people over in a wheelchair, and they'd remember what to do immediately.
Alejandro, do you have any? And then Hugh?
I completely forgot where my train of thought is here. But what I will say is that I'm feeling so inspired to be in this room, because one thing we've been talking about is that there's so much power when we harness, the power that's in our front yards, our backyards, our container gardens. So it really just start with adding a native plant. But for us at the Botanic Garden, part of this, a lot of our programs are informed by this behavioral change model and how you get people to change their behavior. Well, it doesn't start with telling people you're doing it wrong, you need to change that. It's really about getting people to recognize that there is an issue to begin with and make them aware of it. So I think what we strive to do at the Botanic Garden is bring youth in from different schools to start to appreciate nature and make that initial connection. And when you start to do that from a very young age, these are things that are already embedded in the minds of youth, or what we consider them the next generation of conservation stewards. So I think it's important that that's embedded from a very young age, just making folks aware of an issue and connecting them with nature.
And Hugh, it sounds like it's a neighborhood building activity, right? So it's connecting your neighbors together, perhaps?
No.
No? Oh, okay. I tried. Could it be? I don't know.
A couple of them express interest, and I try and educate them a little bit and send emails out. But I
bet in the
rarely
spring
hear
your
anything back.
Yard is gorgeous, and people look at the flowers, and there you go.
The poppies just go nuts in the spring. It's going to be an incredible spring. But one thing I encourage people to do, it's my big deal is bringing the insects in. And what I tell my friends is, plant it and they will come. And
but do people? So how do we say bugs are good? Like, I mean, how do you?
We start by not calling them bugs.
Okay.
A bug infects your computer. It makes you sick. We call them insects.
Any other, but yeah, because you think about, well, I don't want these flying pests or bugs. So just vernacular, the wording is important. Talking about birds, talking about flowers, right?
Well, and I think, Doug spoke to it very well in his presentation, that without bugs, we're done for. Without insects, sorry, we're done for.
Yeah.
They're what holds up all the ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, and there's been a lot of research also about heat islands, about environmental justice policy. So thinking about native plants and repurposing an area or a neighborhood with more native plants or drought resistant or plants can also help the public health of the community and the neighborhood itself, and the biodiversity of that piece. So I think that's another way of making that connection. And then you multiply that in issues about climate change and other kinds of impacts that we've had over time, because it seems so overwhelming. And so then, a little balcony might mean something. But the other question we brought up earlier, locally sourced genetic material, genetic fidelity, like these complex words that are important, but maybe hard to communicate with the general public. And so not only do we want drought resistant, not only do you want native, but you want genetically sourced placed from your immediate area. What are some ways to try to have the general public kind of understand the importance of that? Yeah.
Well, I'd like to transfer that responsibility to the nurserymen themselves. That's what they're going to sell. All the public has to do is go buy those plants. If the nurseryman's selling plants from New York here in California, that's on them. Otherwise, you're asking the public to be more knowledgeable than they want to be right now. So we in other words, we have to make it easy.
Right.
I agree with that sentiment. I worked in a nursery for many years as a propagator, and if you visit Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, we have the 805 initiative, which really advocates for thinking local and planting plants that are not only native to California, but native to your local watershed. So if you visit the Botanic Gardens nursery, you'll see a sign that talks about the 805 initiative, where the plants have been cultivated from, and why it's important to think about the provenance or location of where plants are from. Because native plants are great, as we've established today, but if you can get close to home and start to think about the local genetics of plants, those plants that are, let's say, native to Mission Canyon or the Mission Canyon watershed are just better adapted to the local climate, the soil conditions, but most importantly, they have co-evolved with the local pollinator networks. So native plants are great, but starting to think about local genetics is even better. And again, I concur with what Doug just mentioned. It really is about the nurseries putting that information out there and making it accessible and making it an available choice for people to purchase, right? So starting to think about, well, I want a toyon shrub that was grown from seed that you find in Mission Creek or one of our local watersheds. So it's really up to the nursery and places like the Botanic Garden to provide some of that interpretation about why local genetics is important. So it is an option for you to take a look at and learn more about at the Botanic Garden.
Great. So we have just a few minutes left. I'm going to do one last quick round. Start with you, Dean, on just one last pearl of wisdom before we all leave here. No pressure. But if there's one thing that just wasn't, or maybe you just want to repeat something that you thought was really important.
Come visit the Transformation Acre. That is, it's up on the, do you guys ever, who's not been to Elings Park? It's okay, no shame. 230 acres, it's up on the mesa. You ever see the paragliders? That's Elings Park. And you can come in, we have a variety of entrances to the Calle Mantia entrance at the top, and then it's a straight shot to the Transformation Acre. Come check it out. We've had 3 winters. Gopher baskets, weeding, a lot of tending, but no irrigation.
Great.
So
if an old landfill can do it, so can we, right? So
at sunset, spectacular. The sun setting over the ocean, the Channel Islands, the paragliders, and in 3 weeks we'll have the sheep back.
There you go.
Not in the Transformation Acre, though.
There you go. Hugh, just briefly, go ahead.
2 things, very briefly. I'll go back to plant it and they will come. Second thing, I encourage you to look on iNaturalist and plug in 1914 Robbins Street. That's the front house where I live, where the area is, and just look at the incredible diversity of creatures that have been coming to this yard in the last 2.5 years.
Thank you.
Very quickly, what I will say is just continue gardening. And if you don't garden, start to do it. It's really fun. There's no shame in killing plants. You're a gardener if you do. And horticulture is part science, part art, but also part experimenting. So you're always learning something new. That's what I really love about the work I do in the native plant world and at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden is that native plants there's always something to learn from the plants. So I encourage you all to start to look at them as teachers.
And Doug?
Okay, even more briefly, personal responsibility. We all need healthy ecosystems. It's not optional. So we all have a responsibility to help them sustain healthy ecosystems, replace them. So think about what you can do to help that move forward.
Great. So as you know, the best time to have done something that has a lasting impact was yesterday. The next best time is today. So I want to thank our panelists. We can give them a round of applause, please. Dean, Hugh, Alejandro, and Doug. Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone here today, both in person and online, and this will be living out in the cloud somewhere, so anyone can get back to it another part of in the future or repeat something if you wanted to hear about it again. Thank you for being part of this conversation, for showing up in support of biodiversity. I again just want to thank our generous sponsors for making this happen today. And all this, actually, first off, if you're on staff at the Botanic Garden, if you could also raise your hand and thank the staff. They're amazing. Thank you. And thank you to all our volunteers who help the staff, but our sponsors for today, the Nakashima Rennie family, Blackbird Architects, Christian and Melissa Stepien, Cox Communications, and Newshawk. You don't need to do everything. You just need to do something, right? And supporting biodiversity begins right where we live, right at home. Choose your native plants. Enjoy it. It's beautiful. It has a sense of hope. That's what I really love about being part of the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. Do think about becoming a native plant steward, and I'm sure there's information. I know there's information on the website. Thank you so much for for being here today, and thank you again to all the speakers. And Steve, do we go to you, or we're just done?
We're done, but take a native plant on your way out. Alejandro and his team has grown those plants for you, and so please take either a lemonade berry or a poppy, or if there's enough left.
You don't
Or
drink
both.
lemonade from the lemonade berry. I don't think so. But until you have a lemonade berry or a poppy on your way out, if you're here in the audience. And thank you so much.